The Bucket Brigade has arrived as this video focuses on Activision's hit game Kaboom. Would you believe that there are only 2 more first-party games to come for 1981? Atari seemingly decided to give its new games some breathing room, but this allowed third-party publishers, particularly Activision, plenty of space to put out new games. Both Kaboom and Activision's other July release, Freeway, wound up as some of the company's biggest hits. This is a little ironic, as Kaboom is a riff of a largely unknown Atari arcade game from 1978 called Avalanche. Avalanche was developed by Dave Stubben and Dennis Koble, and initially had players catching eggs in a basket under the name Catch, according to Koble's biography for a later release of Avalanche. After a cool reception, the graphics were tweaked to replace the eggs with rows of snowballs. These were lined up at the top of the screen and would begin tumbling downward, with players trying to catch them with a stack of paddles. The number of paddles starts off at 6, but drops as lines of snowballs are cleared until players are left to try and catch the remaining snowballs with only 1. After a few misses, the game is over. After debuting in April, Avalanche didn't seem to get discussed a whole lot contemporaneously, but it cast a bit of a shadow in terms of home clones. Koble did end up making a version of Avalanche itself for the Atari 8-bit computer line that was eventually distributed through the Atari Program Exchange, or APX. Of all the games that came out on home platforms that were inspired by Avalanche, however, Kaboom is easily the most well-regarded. Kaboom's author, Larry Kaplan, freely admits to basing Kaboom off Avalanche, making some compromises to fit into the VCS's limitations and a 2KB cartridge. With limited resolution and memory, the paddles were reduced in number to 3 at the maximum. The rows of snowballs were changed out for a single villain figure, the Mad Bomber, dropping bombs one at a time across the screen. Kaplan said he used the VCS's frame counter to time the bomber and his bomb drops, while ensuring the game never hits an impossible state despite the bomber's random movements. All told, he said it took him about 3 months to make Kaboom with no real hurdles to overcome in the process, and contemporary reporting suggests the game started reaching stores in July alongside Freeway. David Crane assisted with this conversion of what he called one of Kaplan's favorite arcade games with some graphical and audio flourishes. According to Crane, Kaplan excelled at making compelling gameplay, but wasn't as hot on graphical imagery, which was Crane's strong suit. As such, Crane drew the now iconic Mad Bomber, the bombs, and changed the paddles into buckets of water to catch the bombs in. While Crane said he particularly liked the spark effect on the bomb fuses and the accompanying sound effect, he was particularly proud of using the limitations of CRT TV technology to make the Mad Bomber look more human. The VCS is incapable of producing multicolor sprites. Each scanline of the sprite can only have one selected color that is either on or off for a given pixel. As a result, the bomber's nose and lips are simply pixels where the flesh color is turned off and the gray background is showing through. But, on a CRT and its inherent color bleed, these end up having a more brownish flesh tone. This somewhat comes through with the RF to composite arrangement I use for my video capture, but it's much more obvious on an actual CRT television. The Mad Bomber even has enough visual information to show mood changes, as he visibly gets shocked if the player scores over 10,000 points, grins when you miss a bomb, and scowls at you as you catch his drops. Crane also handled the game audio, including the sparking sound from lit bombs, the explosions, and the sound of a bomb hitting the bucket. I think it's worth noting that when I spoke to VCS co-designer Steve Mayer recently, he remarked that the key thing Japanese companies did better than Atari was incorporating the lessons of animation and character design into their games. You saw these lessons to an extent with 1979's Superman by John Dunn, but Japanese arcade contemporaries of Kaboom, like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, combined strong visual design in concert with effective audio effects to relay some semblance of a story to the players, even if it's a simple one. You can even see this back with Space Invaders and its arcade sequel, with the invaders themselves looking like cartoony sea creatures. But while the VCS was really designed around portraying basic entities like a racing car or a paddle, Kaboom really showcases better than anything before it that at least American game developers were on the same track, and later games like Pitfall will really show the commercial value in this approach. The gaming public and industry at large certainly took note of Kaboom's sensory innovations. Crane's audio and visual work for the game ended up scoring it a Best Audio Visual Effects Archie Award in January 1982's issue of Video, where Arnie Katz and Bill Kunkel called it a feast for the ears and eyes and an instant classic. Kaplan recalled that upon receiving the award, he had to tell the audience that the award actually belonged to Crane, as that was all his part of the project. Kaboom does live up to these accolades. The bright visuals and cartoony sprite work are in line with what was really shaping up to be the Activision house style by this point, and tie together the well-considered play loop. Kaboom starts players off with 3 buckets to catch the bombs in, and after a set number of bombs have been caught, the action halts until the player pushes the button to start the next wave. Each wave gets progressively faster with higher point values, up to an incredible pace that can be difficult to keep up with, and a missed bomb will cost the player one of their buckets. At the same time, missing a bomb will also drop the player down to the previous slower wave with half the normal number of bombs to catch. Since the player earns a new bucket every 1,000 points, the secret to doing well in Kaboom is essentially to manage the game's speed and difficulty by intentionally whiffing a bomb when you come close to earning another bucket. This is the 1981 equivalent of rank control, a concept seen largely in the shooter genre in the late 80s into the 1990s, but it's incredibly well formed here in this VCS release. Functionally, it can be difficult to really get the hang of Kaboom. This is another one of those VCS games that really encourages players to enter a sort of focused trance and let their body take over the actual bomb-catching component. That said, once you start losing buckets at the wrong time, the game becomes even less forgiving and it can be difficult to recover. For those who do wind up getting good at Kaboom, setting the difficulty switches to A will halve the size of your buckets, requiring players to be even more accurate than normal. There's also a 2-player mode, but that's the extent of game types available in Kaboom. And in all fairness, that's all the cartridge needs. Kaboom is simple enough to play, but actually doing well requires skill and experience. At the same time, the pace makes it alluring to jump right back in when you lose. As in several other Activision games, Kaboom had patches that players could earn. For 3,000 points, you could take a photo and send it in to Activision for a Bucket Brigade patch. Reach the maximum score value of 999,999 points, and the game ends. Activision indicated in the manual that they wanted to see photos of it for a special report akin to Laser Blast, but as of this writing, it's unclear if a unique 1 million point patch exists for this game. Based on some early magazine contests, at least a few people did manage to hit that threshold. It's quite easy to find coverage of Kaboom from its heyday, as the game proved popular among players and game writers alike. Electronic Games proclaimed it has the fluid animation and sound effects of a Saturday morning cartoon, and is thoroughly approachable to novices. Furthermore, the magazine praises it as a major improvement over Avalanche and a great break from space-based games. Joystik gave it a strategy write-up while also giving it high marks across several categories, as did the VidKids Book of Home Video Games by Ross and Stovall. This extended to newspapers, too. The Wilmington Morning News ran a piece from Kunkel and Katz that recommended it for the 1981 Christmas season. Kaboom appears to have been a huge success for Activision, right up there with Laser Blast. Activision President Jim Levy named it as one of the 5 games that had sold more than 1 million copies in a June 1984 interview with ANTIC magazine, alongside Pitfall, Laser Blast, Freeway, and River Raid. This already puts it in the upper echelon of releases on the VCS, and even more so for third-party games. Furthermore, Kaboom would end up as one of the few original VCS games that Activision ported to other gaming platforms. Paul Wilson brought a version of the game to the Atari 8-bit computer line and the 5200 that was largely the same as Kaplan's original. Since this version had effectively no visual embellishments or changes over the VCS original, other than adding some skyscrapers in the background, it was not well received in the pages of TV Gamer, but the core Kaboom experience holds up regardless. And it even added a multiplayer mode where one player takes the role as the bomber himself. Yet Kaplan had already left Activision by that point, having departed the company in June 1982. Because Kaplan had ended up backing out of Activision's initial founding and returned late, he ended up only getting half of the stock options of the other 3, and remarked in an interview with Scott Stilphen that he was essentially just an employee there otherwise. More broadly, Kaplan also wanted to work on new hardware, identifying the VCS as being rather long in the tooth. Upon finishing Kaboom, Kaplan turned his attention to the Mattel Intellivision, developing an assembler and a debugger for that piece of hardware. After that, he started working on a game, which he didn't finish before leaving Activision entirely. Kaplan then joined up with Jay Miner, one of the key chip designers for the VCS, and another former Atari engineer, Doug Neubauer, to form a new startup hardware company, but ended up dropping out of that effort in October. They went on to form Amiga, while Kaplan returned to Atari to lead consumer software development under the stipulation that the company would also develop new game hardware. He'd only stick around for 6 months before Atari's massive losses had him make for the exits, but this was enough time for him to cash out of his Activision stock, buy a house, and get a bonus from the company. As mentioned, these Avalanche-style games that Kaboom epitomizes did have other appearances on consoles. The VCS games Lost Luggage and Egomania are both clearly in the same vein, putting their own unique twists on the formula. Lost Luggage has the odd design choice of using a joystick to control the player character, resulting in a real lack of accuracy in your movements. Egomania features a bonus round where you get to fire back at the turkey dropping eggs on you. Other games, such as Big Bird's Egg Catch, Fast Food, or even Mattel's Astro Smash, seem to follow the same spirit of managing falling objects and not letting any get past the player, while also being distinct enough from the arcade original to be less obvious about it. You can even find a spin on Avalanche on the Bally Professional Arcade, with Mike White's Quadra cassette, which was essentially a multi-game collection. The game Landslide on there is very much based on Avalanche, and uses machine language routines to speed things up. White remarked that Quadra was also the first game he did using the Blue RAM memory expansion for the Bally Arcade, though he did also produce a version that runs on the standard Astro Basic. This all said, there's a reason none of these are as well remembered as Kaboom. Kaplan's game is regarded as one of the crown jewels of the VCS library for very good reason, with its combination of uniquely charming visuals and compelling, straightforward gameplay. Activision itself planned, though never released, a Super NES sequel in the early 90s during the company's lowest point that was reportedly cancelled internally due to being technically unimpressive. But the company did license the game out to Tiger Electronics for a keychain LCD game circa 1997, when Atari nostalgia was really in its heyday. The game has also been re-released a couple of times in Activision compilations and on dedicated Atari flashback consoles, though not all of these were successful ports. Kaboom is a title that really relies on the paddle controllers to be really playable. As long as paddles are involved though, Kaboom is a great time, and it is very easy to recommend even today. Next time, we're racing across the John C. Lodge Expressway.